Hello, I'm Ron Powell, an independent analyst and industry expert for the BI Network and executive producer of the World Transformed Fast Forward series. My focus is on business intelligence, analytics, big data, and data warehousing. My guest today is Dr. Barry Devlin, founder and principal for Ninesight Consulting. Today we'll be discussing the evolution of the Production Analytic Platform that will bridge the operational informational divide that exists today. Welcome, Barry.
Thanks, Ron. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
First, the data warehouse back in the 80s. More recently, business unintelligence. Now, Production Analytic Platform. You seem to like drawing architectures. Why?
Architectures are really important to me. Back in the 80s, it was a question of trying to figure out a very key new prospect then, which was how do we support decision-making when data is coming from many different platforms. And back in those days, of course, they were just different applications on a mainframe, but it was still a lot of data coming from different places. And to me, this architecture idea is really important for anything that involves a large cross-enterprise or cross-functional project. The architecture sets the scene, it sets boundaries, it sets expectations, first for the business and then for delivery. That's really important because in these days, and with modern time pressures that we have, the fact that vendors are always pushing to sell stuff, we often end up having this rush to product selection. I often think that the data lake, for example, today is a very interesting example of how that has happened, because the data lake that I've seen, many of the architectures are productologies. They are a list of products rather than a list of functions, a list of what it is we need to do in order to get to a particular business goal. With a big project, whether it's a lake or whether it's a warehouse or indeed whether it's this production analytic platform, I think we have to start from an architecture that sets the scene, that allows the business people to understand what it is they're getting, to have that conversation with them, and then go into the implementation phase.
The architecture is much like a foundation that you build something on, much like when we're building a house, correct?
Absolutely. We know how important it is to have the architecture for our houses first, because otherwise we end up with something that doesn't really work to do the job that we need.
Can you explain what is important about this new production analytic platform?
Let's go back to data warehousing and before. There was this concept that we came up with back as far as the 70s, which was about splitting the operational and informational worlds from one another. And that made a lot of sense at the time because business was a lot slower then. We didn't need to have decisions being made at the speed of light. We didn't need to have this idea that business wanted to see every last change in every transaction of the business. Back then, I remember in the early days of warehousing, the business folks were saying, I don't even want to see that stuff. I'm happy to see the end of day or even to the end of week in some cases because I can't handle the chopping and changing that happens in between. But that was then and this is now. The technology has changed to allow us to have much more speedy access to decision making. This idea of this split between operational and informational systems has really started, maybe as far back as 10 years ago, to cause us problems. It's starting to cause problems in that when you have operational analytics or when you've got the Internet of Things, we end up having to shuttle data back and forth, models back and forth, inputs and outputs back and forth between these two systems. When we do that, we get delays, we have data management problems, we have a lot of issues that we really need to deal with. So what the Production Analytic Platform is trying to do is to address that. This was a problem I've been thinking about over a few years, and then I had some interesting conversations with my friends in Teradata who were telling me about all of the new analytic and other types of functions that they've been adding and are continuing to add to their database. Now, the Teradata database is an interesting beast because, yes, it is about a data warehouse, but it is a very powerful and a very fast and very production-oriented data warehouse or database. And so this idea came to me that it was clear that the solution to this operational informational divide was to think about something like this production analytic platform built upon the strengths of the relational database and of the traditional relational databases like Teradata's, or indeed probably also like DB2. So this idea that you could build upon those features and functions of a traditional relational database in order to begin to do much more advanced analytics.
What are the key characteristics of the Production Analytic Platform?
Let's say we're talking about a production analytic platform based on a relational database, because that's really what I'm thinking about when I talk about this architecture. What we really need is support, an embedded support for a wide range of query, reporting, advanced analytic functions, and the sort of data that's needed to support them. So different data formats, JSON, let's say, data formats, CSVs, as well as the relational formats. The built-in storage, the built-in support, the built-in ability to do all of that function around those types of data becomes really important. Another thing is scalability. That's a big data lake thing as well. But scalability here is about the volumes necessary for production use of this data that's coming from the Internet of Things. The initial analytical use may be bigger. There's a balance here that we need to reach between the different levels of size, of speed, and of ability to handle these. There's a few others as well.
Some people are saying that the data lake will kill the data warehouse. But you are sort of suggesting here that the Production Analytic Platform is built out from the data warehouse. Why not from the data lake?
The death of the data warehouse has been announced so many times already. I'm beginning to wonder. The data lake is a different thing than the data warehouse. At its best, it's more of an informational than an operational environment. This name, Production Analytic Platform, is formulated in the way that production is the first word, because production is important and it's taking analytics into production. When I look at data lakes and when I look at the platforms on which data lakes are built, they're still fairly immature. They don't have the levels of reliability, maintainability, production type of values that I would see in traditional relational databases. Now, it may well be that it will change over time and the data lake products will get those characteristics. That's going to take some time. Since these characteristics are at the heart of the traditional relational databases, again, like Teradata's database, I think that's why it makes it so much easier to say, let's think about doing the production aspects of the analytics in a platform that is capable of doing that. What I've then drawn is a picture which says, if I start from the data warehouse, which was always an informational construct, and extend it back into the operational world, a little bit like we used to add in the operational data store into architectures. But if we take the data warehouse and extend it back into the operational world, then I think we've got a very good platform for allowing us to share data between the data lake and the data warehouse environment. The data warehouse is the best place to do that. The relational database, been around since the 70s, there's a lot of function, a lot of reliability function, a lot of maintainability function, and so on that has been built into those databases. And I think it's good to reuse that. I think that will have to be built into the data lakes in the future. I don't think it's there yet.
Thank you, Barry, for discussing with us how this Production Analytic Platform will be able to meet the current operational and informational needs of today's enterprises.
It's been a pleasure.